Warning, the following program may contain traces of irony, sarcasm, satire, parody, mockery, banter, caricature, and nuts. The opinions expressed are almost certainly not shared by self-appointed officious dictatorial wowsers. If you are dangerously irony deficient or allergic to mockery of the self-important and corrupt, then get a life.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's right. Welcome back to another episode of Environmental as Anything, where we get to stand up for all life in the universe, no less. Thank you for joining me. I'm Sean O'Shannessy. I live, work and play here on Bundjalung country on the people of the Widjabul Wyable Nation. And we say thank you to them for their custody of this land over thousands of years. And sorry for the mess that's been made by colonialism. We're trying to do our best to clean it up. I'm in the studio today with a very special guest. I'm very pleased and privileged to have with me today my good friend and colleague, Beck Horridge from 3CR. Hey, Beck.
Same to you, Sean. Very privileged and, also really grateful to be on this Bundjalung country. It is looking very moist.
It's looking moist and green and lovely, isn't it, at the moment? It's strange how that good thing, that all that good rain can make people a little bit anxious, but still, it had delightful effects on the landscapes. So we've got a big story coming up. Did you want to quickly introduce that?
Is this the one for Cabbage Tree Island?
Well, we've got two big stories, haven't we? But yesterday we went and did that interview with the Cabbage Tree Island inhabitants. The local story that we were talking about, we went to yesterday was, of course, the terribly oppressive situation for the people of Cabbage Tree Island, the owners of that property, that land, who have been living there all of their lives and for generations, now excluded from their property on the pretext that they've been flooded. So one that a lot of people in Lismore could relate to, but I think that, anyway, we'll get to all the details of that later, eh?
Was a really good trip to Cabbage Tree Island with you, Sean.
It was really informative, quite an exciting day out, actually, and hopefully people will enjoy that story. So we'll be covering that. Last week in Lismore, the Rising Tide launched their nationwide push to get everybody out there to the world's biggest coal port, which is in Newcastle, of course, for this year's event, which they're hoping to get 10,000 people to. So we've got audio of our very own local star activist Valerie Thompson and, of course, Sue Higginson, who were both at the event and gave some very informative and rousing addresses to the crowd. And so we'll be sharing that with you later in the show. And I was going to say, this the frothing at the mouth from the Murdoch criminal empire, where they've been getting on their high horses about anybody else in Australia, anybody suggesting that Australia is a racist country. Apparently, Laura Tingle, the chief political correspondent for the APC, one of Australia's preeminent journalists, got out and made the unexceptionable comment that Australia is a racist country. We should just make the point that Australia has been founded on systematic racism. Like that my people were dragged here in chains by a racist empire who had been systematically exterminating them from their own country, dispossessing them of their land, stealing it, forcing them to work in slave-like conditions and forcing them into a situation where they were actually starving. The Great Famine, as it was called, the potato famine, and the potatoes weren't to blame. It was the British exporting beef from Ireland while the Irish were starving that caused the famine. And of course then they exported them from Ireland to Australia. So that's how my ancestors ended up here. But it was by an act of racism, which had been going on in the brutish empire for hundreds of years out by that stage. They not only brought those people, but they brought their system of extermination and oppression here to practice on the locals, the people who owned the land that they were intending to steal. They came here and stole the land from those people here in the Bundjalung people, but throughout Australia, Indigenous people were dispossessed of their property, just as they still are being in Cabbage Tree Island, it seems. So to say that Australia is not a racist country, or to object to somebody saying that there is a serious problem with racism here in Australia, is to give comfort to racists. It's not to say that all Australians are deeply racist, but let's face it, Andrew Blott and Petro Credulous, they're racists. They systematically lie about these things and use race to further their own political agendas. And anybody who stands up for them or with them is a racist. And you can tune out and you can get hot under the collar as much as you want, but I don't want you. And in my community, you can get stuffed. What did you want to say about that, Ben?
Anybody who says Australia isn't a racist country hasn't been to Australia.
Yeah, that's right.
Where have you been, mate? Just go anywhere and you can see racism on the streets.
Yeah. The trouble is that what you can see sort of depends on what you're culturated to, doesn't it? So people tend to not see what they're used to and what they believe is normal. And so it's been normalised. It's been perfectly normalised in Australia for most people. They kind of invisible to it. And most people object to the idea that they themselves are racist, which is fair enough. Most people don't want to be racists. And that is the majority of Australians do not want to be racist. I don't want to be racist, but it's a struggle. I've been brought up in a racist society and I have to work against those racist education. And I think that and you too, eh?
I'd agree with that. Yeah. I would say my mind, well, I'm British Australian from Scotland. I try to claim that I'm Scottish, but I really am Britain. And my mind is colonised. I discover it all the time. It's kind of embarrassing.
It's embarrassing, it's awkward, but it's like any failing or difficulty that we have in life. We have to just struggle on and try to make the best of it, acknowledge it, be honest about it, work with it. If we pretend that it's not happening, then we just deepen the problem and make it worse. So I think that the people who are anti-racist need to start with ourselves and say, yes, I've got my own racism and I'm trying to struggle to eliminate that. And we need to be as kind to each other as people as we can. But our systems and our institutions, it should not be tolerated at any level within the media or within governments or in any other part of our institutional arrangements that racism is allowed to persist. And so, for those, scumbags at the Murdoch criminal empire who go around persistently lying about all the important issues in Australia, that like Andrew Blott and Petro Credulous, they are attempting deliberately to deceive us into complacency about the important issues of the world and to try to trick us into being preoccupied with trivialities, basically. So I'm saying yes, good on Laura Tingle getting up and saying the truth, which needed to be said. And as far as the Murdoch criminal empire goes, why don't they just shut up and leave us alone? Anyway, that's my take on it, and as always, I'll now move on to more substantive issues than my opinions, but take it as you may. But next up here on Environmental as Anything, when listening to a presentation given by Valerie Thompson to a film night at the Tombra Cafe on Dawson Street in Lismore last Friday week it was, and that was the launch essentially of the nationwide campaign to get the rising tide back on track for 10 times as much action against our fossil fuels in the world's biggest coal port at Newcastle. So Valerie gave a great presentation there. So I got the audio from that presentation. I thought I'd play it for you. And then after that, I'll come back with a few words from Sue Higginson, the MLC Upper House member from the New South Wales Parliament, representing us, of course, from this area. So here's Valerie Thompson just talking about what the rising tide is and what it's all about and what we're hoping to achieve in the lead up to November 19th to the 28th. So get yourself, put it in the book it into your diary now, 19th of November to the 28th. It's almost 10 days of community action up there in and around Newcastle. So here's Valerie to tell us all about it.
Alrighty, so I don't probably need to go too much into what's happening with our climate. I think most of us in this room are here because we already know and have probably known for the last 20 to 30 years. But what we do know, of course, is that those tipping points are increasingly starting to come into play, and we're seeing, phenomenal increases in temperature, which is an existential threat to all of us and life on Earth and everything that we love. We also know that fossil fuels are driving this, and we've also known this for decades. Kids at school, they get taught it when they're in primary school. Some of those kids who've been taught in primary school, like my daughter, are now actually finished high school and into the world, having been told as a child that fossil fuels need to, basically stop and be phased out in order for our kids to be okay and for us to have life on Earth in the way that we know it. However, that's not happening, and we also know that coal, oil and gas is that over 75% of the actual fossil fuel emissions. So, as Antonio Guterres has said for this year, the fossil fuel era is on its last legs. The renewable energy revolution is unstoppable, but we must act this year, 2024, this year, to ensure that the transition is just for people and planet. He's also, of course, last year was quoted saying, "No more baby steps, the time to action is now." So there has to be no new coal mines if we're to avoid dangerous climate change. However, since in the time they've been in power, Labor has already approved 4 new coal mines and is seriously considering a further 25, which has over 5,000 million tonnes of coal and nearly 13,000 million tonnes of emissions. So something is happening and they are not shifting where they stand. So Newcastle Coalport and the Newcastle Basin, which we've got here, the Hunter Basin, is a huge global contributor. So you can sort of see that it just accounts for the lion's share of all domestic emissions in Australia, between the actual coalport itself and then all the mines that are in the valley there. So our campaign, even though we are in the Northern Rivers, is highly related. We are part of now a national movement, Rising Tides Become National, which is basically a grassroots community to end new fossil fuel projects and coal exports by building mass popular support, and I would say, and working towards and moving towards large-scale material disruption, which involves considerable capacity building, which is the phase that we are in actively now in this region, amongst other parts of Australia. So the 3 key demands of Rising Tide: immediately cancel all new fossil fuels. There's 75% tax to justly fund the transition over, and also make sure that we can pay for the damage that's already been done, which is of course currently not being funded, and then end all coal exports from Newcastle, which we know is the world's largest coal port, by 2030. So this is 2023 down in the world's largest coal port. This was the People's Blockade of November 2023, which saw 109 arrests, like over 1,000 people out in the water blockading over 3 solid days, 30 hours. Here's the Northern Rivers we represented. Had a great little crew with a little affinity group and got ourselves nicely organised, but not as nicely organised as we will be this year. So what has happened also in 2023 is that we've sort of come back, started getting organised, and this year launched not only Rising Tide Northern Rivers, but also the Climate Justice Alliance Northern Rivers, because there's so much more work to be done than just around the call for ending the new coal and gas. Like there's just, in our region, there's forests, there's so many things that are all related that we really want to make sure that we pull together and work for justice on, particularly with our First Nations colleagues, because the solidarity in this area has just been so awesome, such amazing work. So that's how it's looking so far. So 2024, we'll be heading back again with, with hundreds of people from this region. So we're really looking forward to joining you, and we're also being involved now with organising and formulating how that's going to look. And so there's quite a few opportunities to be involved with whatever your passion is, and we will talk about that more at the end. And so in terms of our rising tide phases for this region, we're actually working on people building taking the pledge, building community, building our affinity groups, building our working groups and capacities, and then we too will join in the civil resistance phase of rising tide. So phase one is the pledge itself, which I think, how many of you have already taken the pledge? Yeah, all right, lots of you. I think come to our stall if you haven't yet. We can organise and tell you a little bit more about that. So I'll move on to the second one, phase two then. So basically, as many of us will know from the work in the forest, which has just gone decades after decades, you know, with ongoing actions, we can just do that over vast periods of time, over vast energy, without having the ideal outcome that we want. So this model with rising tide is essentially, the theory of change is like, as we reach ecological tipping points, so do we reach social tipping points around the way that we can mobilise en masse. So just in the same way we're seeing these exponential events happening, we too intend and are actually already growing exponentially. So that's our, you know, it always seems so, spend a whole life going, no, not exponential growth, but actually, in this instance, we are just, this is exactly what we're doing. And as we're mapping it as we go in terms of that building capacity, and the idea being that increasing capacity will actually force, federally, finally, these entrenched power structures that are continuing to uphold these absolutely crazy ideas that they could actually, in this day and age, with everything we know, all the science, all of the reality around us, that they're still approving new coal and gas. It's just so ridiculous. So, you know, that's where we're going. We're going to the tipping points. Next one. Okay, so there's a few phases, or there's a few elements of this, but what people probably, and the media definitely focuses on, is the mass arrest. 109 people, largest ever action for climate in Australia's history, and the oldest fella to ever be arrested in Australia's entire history at 97 years old. So there's been a lot of focus on that, and there's our lovely MJ from this region representing Northern Rivers still. But also, just as we say when we're teaching in VDA at Wallumer in the forest, 80 or more % of what really makes the magic happen at these actions is all the people who come along and bring their skills and passion and support, but don't get arrested. So that's what you're seeing there. You're seeing Violet and a whole bunch of others who are there doing their chants and supporting people who got arrested to have a really amazing experience. And then you've got all the people who stayed on the beach and cheered on and just looked so fabulous and were so fabulous, and also did all of the other things that brings together this amount of people over this amount of time to bring this. So come to our events that we've got on. Marie will explain that a little bit more. And bring your friends, because we are growing and we want to grow more, and we need to grow more in order to shift a very entrenched power structure that's actually been setting itself up for decades and generations really, that we're having to dismantle at this point. And so, yeah, we've got 2 more streaming set, and we're going to have more after this. But the 6th of June Goldie, 8th of June Nimbin. We've got kayaking on Sunday. We're meeting at 9:30 as part of the Monitor Runs. We're going in that. And then we've got the Convergence coming up on the Saturday 22nd of June, which is going to be a full day at the Bangalore ANI Hall starting at 10. And then we've also got the day before, we're doing a tweed action, which I think, are you going to talk 2 more? Yeah, that's all been covered in the set. So there's some of the things, but we've got some Yammer and Iluka screenings coming up. There'll be more. And then of course we're building to the 2024 blockade of the Newcastle port down in Newey, Wabakoo country, 1928, 10 days, 10,000 people. I think they're aiming for 1,000 arrests. So lots and lots and lots of things that have to be done between now and then. It's going to be enormous and fantastic, and you'll get a bit of a taster coming up. So the really key thing is around bringing your skills and passions into this in whatever way drives you, because that's what makes it really magic and bring us together. And we're actually going to use a range of models, including working groups and affinity groups, self-organising. And we started that last year, and we'll certainly be building it on this year. Thanks everyone, looking forward to seeing you all there.
Thank you, Valerie. That would be a good time. It was the best fun, and you all that were there know it was. It was also, there were some crazy moments. I just want to give one anecdote. You know, I love the war stories, I think. But for me, I took on a bit of the police liaison role. And it was that moment, you know, we've been working with the police on all of the really important things up until the moment when, for those that don't know, there was a plan. We had an authorisation, permission to protest, so we had an authorisation to blockade the port for that 30 hours. But the cunning plan, of course, was to carry on the blockade after those 30 hours and actually then engage in the acts of non-violent civil disobedience. And so for that 30 hours, I was working with police quite a lot on all of these kind of minor but significant issues, you know, because we had this amazing camp. It kind of covered car parks and grasslands, and we had a bunch of cops. And you know what cops are like when they all get together and there's a big bunch of people and there's a protest, they all get pumped up. And anyway, so we had all these highway patrol cops that were unnecessarily fining all of our wonderful people who were driving in, dropping their kayaks off, and you know, it was just really, really, really lame police arm of the state flexing its muscle. So I spent most of the 30 hours, you know, running backwards and forwards to the head honcho cops who had their big setup down the road a bit with their massive vans and all their antennas and all of their incredible equipment. And I was like, can you just stop it? You know, just stop it. Go and stop you guys, because they're all out there just running amok. Anyway, so over these 30 hours, we kind of built up this interesting relationship, and I had this direct line to the head cop. And then there were two head cops, you know, the inspectors, and they were feeling like they had everything very much under control. It was all okay, and they were giving a bit, taking a bit, flexing a bit of muscle, relaxing a bit. And then all of a sudden, the moment came, and they were just kind of like, what's happening? What's going on? And I'm just like, oh my God, who knows? Look at this. There goes the people on their kayaks out onto the water. And they're sort of looking at me, as police always do when you police liaison. They're looking at me like, you knew about this. And I'm just like, people are people. People do what they do. And when there's a giant coal port and there's a world's largest people's blockade and there's kayaks, people are going to do what they do. Anyway, it was really interesting because then in comes that kind of the defiance and the resistance right in the face of police and how you deal with that. And I had one inspector who was personally wounded. He was personally affronted. This was his gig, and it was all about to go wrong, and he was losing control, and the people had taken the power, and he couldn't believe it, and he wasn't coping. And there was this other cop who was kind of standing back going, holy heck, this is pretty impressive. And I was standing there going, I was saying, hey, from here on, your number one job is to make sure nobody gets hurt. That's actually what you're here to do. Everything else we sort out later. And I had this one inspector, and he's like, so, you've got to tell them I'm going to throw the book. We're going to do, there's anti-protest laws, and we're going to throw the book. You know the fines are heavy, you know. And I said, I know, all right. And it was that one moment, and I just thought, no, you're not going to do this. You're not going to ruin this event. These people are beautiful. They've had the best time. They've built the most incredible movement right here. There's been music, there's been art, there's been laughter, there's been chaos, as there always is in the dark hours. There's been First Nations magic, there's been connection, there's been activism, there's been everything. And now you are standing in the face of that, threatening to be the worst of the worst. And I couldn't help it. I kind of did that whole, okay, this is it. This is my one moment of the action. And I'm just standing there going, I'm going to do it. And I literally just said to him in front of the nice cop, and I said, you know what? You do that and you know what happens. We bring out all the big guns. We bring out all the lawyers. We will defend every single one of these beautiful people. And you know, every one of those people out there is a brilliant person with an amazing history, a fantastic character, and the judges are going to love them, and we're going to win, and you're going to look stupid, and you will cost the state thousands of dollars, and we will win again. And the other cop just laughed. And just it was so funny. And it was great because we literally, most of the beautiful, amazing 107, 108, fantastic people, and you know, some of those people, I know, I spoke to many of them beforehand who came to me and said, hey, I'm thinking of getting arrested, I'm a law student, or I've got this career, what's going to happen to me? And I see what that means and what that looks like, and the fear and the courage and the overcoming and the journey that a human makes when they are just so beautiful, so courageous and so committed. So I could stand there literally and say how wonderful, because I knew already. And it was hilarious because, yeah, the other good cop just went, well, she's right. And so the fines, most people got charged with really, really minor offences in the scheme of things. Fine-only offences for doing the wrong thing on water in a port. You know, none of these anti-protest, Perrottet with the New South Wales Labor government, $22,000, 2 years in prison, all the nonsense that we know. Wonderful sister, Violet Coco, has stood in the face of in the ultimate defiance and really, really paved a way of how awful that injustice looks when the state pulls that. So we all got to have fun, even I got to have heaps of fun, and then with the cops. And it really is amazing because I remember when the beautiful, at the time, very small Rising Tide mob was sitting around a table in Newcastle at Pachamama, and they were talking about this first wave and what it was going to look like. And I saw those sort of core inner kind of mobilised few, and I just watched, and I could see this idea growing, and this incredible passion, and this courage, and this just absolute strategic vision of how to win, and what winning looks like for us as a people. And at the end of the day, that's what we've got to do, folks. 2 days ago, we got really bad climate news in New South Wales. The New South Wales Men's Labor government has made the announcement and the decision that they're going to extend the life of the Eraring power plant right here in New South Wales. The oldest, dirtiest, most polluting, climate-wrecking coal-fired power plant in this country, and our Labor government is extending the life of it. And you know what the experts said? As soon as it happened, our really, really good climate, finance and energy experts, the really good ones, they've told the truth and they've spoken what this is. This is not about keeping the lights on. This is actually about means keeping himself in power, and this is about keeping prices down in the way the government economic model sees to keep prices down. That's what this is. And let's think about it. If we're talking about prices and budgets, there's only one budget any leader or politician should be concerned about right now, and that is our carbon budget, not our economic budget. Oh, and here's the other thing about keeping Eraring open. We're going to underwrite their losses, because we know there's going to be losses, to the tune of $225 million per year. The plant could be expanded for 4 years. We're looking at anywhere near $750 million of public money to cook our planet. It's absolutely... Politics is failing. It's really failing. And honestly, I know, I can tell you, I'm in Macquarie Street. I walk the halls of it. I see, I can assure you, it's failing. There's good people there. There's good people trying to do good things. But the power right now is with you guys. And there has never, ever been a more important time for us to work together, to get even more connected than we are, to infect that connection everywhere we go, to get to Newcastle. It's so much fun, guys. Put it in your calendar now. Make sure everybody you know is going, that's my family holiday, that's where we're going, because it is seriously, it is beautiful, it's fun, and we come together, and the strategy, the intelligence, the side activities, it's amazing. So put it in the calendar, make your way to get down there for all of those 10 days, and let's talk about it. And remember, this is not rising tide over there. You are the next wave. You are rising tide. It's a collective movement. It's an inclusive movement. So as we go from tonight, we talk about us as rising tide, and we go out and we tell everybody else they are welcome and they are necessary and they are needed to join the second wave. And it's going to be awesome. So that's my rave. If anybody has any questions, go for it. And we'll do the thing.
Rising tide! Rising tide! Rising tide! Rising tide!
Here you are, tuned into Environmental as Anything. Thanks for being with us today, and we've got so much coming up in the show. But first I should say we just heard from Valerie Thompson and Sue Higginson at the event here in Lismore just over a week ago, launching the Rising Tides national push to get 10,000 people there to the world's biggest coal port in Newcastle. Get down there if you can from the 19th to the 28th of November this year in Newcastle.